Hey guys, it's Maxi back again with another video. Today I'm going to talk about the financial privileges that we have in America, right? And how Bitcoin can help solve some problems for people in third world countries. So, if you can see here, approximately 1.4 billion adults remain unbanked and they can't get a bank account. Okay, imagine trying to save up money in cash because you don't have a bank account. Right? With Bitcoin, they can, as long as they have internet access, they can save up money with a bank account, right? They get a bank account, a digital bank account that they have access to at any time, right? So that's huge already. If you look right here, the dollar compared to Bitcoin has lost 63% over the last 2 years and 90% over the last 5 years, right? And that's one of the better currencies that we have if you compare it to Bitcoin, right? The dollar is like the best in terms of holding on to its value. And so when we're in America looking at, who's going to use Bitcoin, right? The problem is that a lot of people aren't in a place where they have to care about Bitcoin, right? In America, we get dollars, we get paid in dollars, right? Which is other countries would love to be paid in dollars, right? They don't get paid in dollars. They get paid in whatever their local currency is, right? Indian rupees, right? Whatever it is. And with that, we also have access to American capital markets, right? And we have financial education that allows us to understand what the stock market is, to understand what inflation is, right? To understand that you can't just hold your money in dollars, that it will go away, right? It's passed down with generations, right? That's become pretty knowledge. It's become everyone knows that now in America, right? Even I mean I wouldn't say everyone. Like 62% of U.S. adults have money invested in the stock market, right? So trying to avoid fiat debasement, only 62% of people even know what they're doing with that. Okay, and the rest are just saving in cash and losing value. Okay, if they were saving up to buy a house, that house is constantly running away from them in terms of how much money they can save up. Okay, we have access to S&P. It's returned 76% in the past 5 years. Now, do I think that's good? No, I don't. It's fine. It's a way to avoid debasement, but that's probably about the rate of money printing that we've had in the last 5 years is going to be 78%, right? We've drastically inflated the money supply since COVID. So if you look here, right, there's people in India that get paid in rupees, and compared to Bitcoin, it's down 91% and 65% in the last 2 years, 91% in the last 5 years. We can even compare it to the dollar, right? Even compared to the dollar, which is also losing value. The last 5 years, it's lost 12% even to the dollar, right? So these currencies are even worse than the dollar. And this one's not even that bad, right? The Indian rupee. But if you look here, only 6% of the Indian population is actively involved in the stock market. Okay? It's been steadily rising due to factors like increased financial awareness and easier access to technology. Okay, so you just have to understand that most people in the world are not in the United States of America with access to the S&P or even the knowledge about what it is, right? So when their governments just fully take advantage of them and steal their savings, it's basically impossible to save in these places, right? And so what that does is it gives you a different time preference, right? You become very present minded and all you worry about is right now. Because if you try to save, right, you just lose your value. Okay? Even against the dollar, against 10 years, it's down 28%, which the dollar is also losing value, right? So if you're trying to save for a house, it's constantly running away from you. Anything you want to save up for, you're not storing value well, right? So this is another good. This is a great example, right? Is the Nigerian naira. It's lost 90% just in the last 2 years to Bitcoin. It's lost 98% in the last 5 years compared to Bitcoin. Compared to the dollar, right? These are the things that we don't realize living in the US. We're privileged to these things. 70% to the dollar in 2 years. Okay? Imagine trying to save in Naira, and every time you're saving, it's just constantly, they're printing money and stealing value from you, right? Everything's just, for an example, right? You would get paid, I don't know the exchange rates or how valuable their dollars are, right? But let's say you make 1,000 Nigerian Naira in a week, okay? You save all of that, okay? You make the sacrifice that you're not going to spend that right now. You're going to put it away, and you're going to come back in 3 years. You want to, save up for something. In 3 years, that $1,000 salary, that weekly salary that you saved, well, now the weekly salary is probably 5,000, 10,000, right? So you're saving your week salary. You actually say in 3 years, in just 3 years times, you only have a fifth or a tenth of a week's salary. Okay? So that just destroys people's incentive to save. So yeah, if you look here, Nigeria is actually a front runner for Bitcoin adoption, and that's not surprising, right? They've found that 33.4 million Nigerians have owned or traded crypto. That's a 35% adoption rate among people between ages of 18 and 60. And 52% of Nigerians have distributed more than half of their own wealth into assets like Bitcoin. Okay? 52%. More than half of their wealth into assets like Bitcoin. People that are in environments like this, in hyperinflationary currencies, they get it, right? It's hard for people in the US to get it because ours is so slow and methodically, stolen. The value is so slowly and methodically stolen that we hardly even realize that it's happening unless you get a COVID style event and we print 40% of the money supply in a year, right? But typically it's just very slow, methodical economic drain from anyone who's saving in the currency, right? So it's no surprise that you see people in Nigeria flocking to Bitcoin, right? You see only less than 3% of the population invests in the formal financial markets in Nigeria too. So they also don't invest in the stock market, right? So it's you get these people just saving up, and they're not able to save, right? They quickly will realize, after you save for 5 years, you're very diligent, you have a normal job, and you save half your income, right? You sacrifice, you don't spend extra money on takeout. They can be diligent at saving, and after 5 years, everything they saved up is going to be basically useless. Okay? And that's the reality for a majority of the population. So I just want everyone to realize that we are very privileged in the US, and it's hard for us sometimes to understand the value of Bitcoin. But when you look at it from the perspective of 1.4 billion adults being unbanked, I think it starts to make a little bit more sense. Even if you can't understand it from the perspective of, why we need it in the US. And we do need it in the US, right? We still do need it in the US. It still solves a lot of problems, but these problems they're not slapping you in the face like they are if you live in Nigeria, right? If you live in Nigeria, they get Bitcoin, right? They understand it. They understand the value proposition. It's a little bit harder to see when it is so slow and methodical. But that is the video for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you have any suggestions for a future video, and I will see you later.